several screenwriters who've worked for Netflix have come forward stating a common note from company executives is, quote, have this character announce what they're doing so that viewers who have this program on in the background can follow along. Here's some examples of dialogue from the Netflix film Irish Wish, starring Lindsay Lohan.
We spent a day together, Lohan tells her lover James. I admit it was a beautiful day, filled with dramatic vistas and romantic rain, but that doesn't give you the right to question my life choices. Tomorrow, I'm marrying Paul Kennedy.
Fine. That will be the last you see of me, because after this job is over, I'm off to Bolivia to photograph an endangered tree lizard. And the sad thing about this is that this isn't writing that is limited only to Netflix originals.
No.
This is writing that we have seen in major motion pictures. I remember when we went to see Longlegs in theaters, at the end of that film, they did a voiceover narration running down the plot of the film so us idiot moviegoers could understand their elevated plot points.
And I thought one of the major rules of screenwriting was show me, don't tell me.
Well, you would think that. And it's not just because then, people are going to come in and be like, well, Longlegs was kind of like this independent, successful horror film. But it's not only limited to that, because we have seen people like Christopher Nolan include stuff like this in his, we're going to go into the dream, and then we're going to convince them that they are dreaming, and then we're going to put the bomb in there, but it's their bomb that they're then going to detonate, and then that pulls them out to the dream within a dream.
Yeah,
and
he's a little famous for having such convoluted plot lines that he feels the need to constantly explain to you what's happening.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that it's not even
Him.
Christopher. Yeah, it's not Nolan who's like, man, I've got to explain this.
Yeah.
I guarantee you it's studio executives who come back with notes like, dude, no one is going to understand this. Please tell them what is going on. But it's no wonder, because when we went to go watch Longlegs, I do remember people audibly yawning and groaning during the film, and people on their cell phones, which this is what that style of writing caters to, the people who aren't paying attention.
Only half watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, people like me and you who are there for the movie, I wanted to be, dude,
in the film.
I bought into the marketing, man. I was there.
Yeah.
For all of it. I wanted to be sucked in. I wanted to be enveloped.
Fully immersed in Nicolas Cage.
In Nicolas Cage, right? But these people ruined that experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of distraction.
It's like sitting there trying to watch a film while a strobe light is going off.
Oh, with
the phones. Then the writing that tells you what's going on is just grueling for a fellow writer to sit there and watch, and especially a fan of film like we are.
Yeah. Well, imagine how some of those writers feel being told to write this way.
Subtlety is absolutely dead and gone in filmmaking right now. What are we supposed to? Yeah, right. What are we supposed to get from this? What are the life lessons? It's all just right there in front of your face. You're being indoctrinated by these films now, I feel like.
I mean, yeah, maybe it's a little indoctrination or attempt at indoctrination, but more it's just, I think you're right on the right path with saying that the subtlety is all gone, because I feel like film, like most art, has always tried to teach a lesson or try, you know what I mean? There's always some kind of morality tale going on or something like that. But just with what we were speaking about before, the fine art of writing.
Yeah.
That's another thing that's been lost in, maybe it has to do with the attention spans. And so they think they need to like flashing red light. This is what we're trying to tell you.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just, writers are in a hurry, or producers are like, man, this is what we want to tell people. Like, we have an agenda, whatever it is. They are like a wet fish slapping you across the face with whatever it is the story's trying to tell you, instead of making you think about it yourself.
Well, I think part of that is the fact that now, instead of catering to, it used to be, you know, you had the US market, then you had the foreign market, and they all looked after each other. They all put their cultures first. Now it's like, well, we need the Chinese market. There's so many people in China that we can't have the nuances. We can't focus primarily on the dialogue that may go over their heads.
Oh, so you're saying that there's a fear of loss in translation,
also that,
right?
Yeah.
Like this isn't going to make as much sense, so we need to really spell it out.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes, because there's certain things that are universal. You know, a big robot comes on the screen. That's universal. An explosion goes off. Well, everybody knows what that means.
Yeah.
But if there are relationship dynamics, that can go in, you know, the way we speak and everything like that, that can really go over some heads, and they're left sitting there, you know, what's going on?
Right. The whole purpose of that movie, Lost in Translation, right? So yeah. I agree. It's you know, we're no longer writing things like The Twilight Zone or It's a Wonderful Life or
and then going back to the indoctrination or you know, that's it's like The Twilight Zone taught us all lessons, and it wasn't necessarily it is inherently sort of political.
but I think it was probably considered a little radical for its time.
But they were life lessons that would essentially come down to don't be a jerk. Don't do
some of them,
And it would be stuff that you could take away with you, and then you revisit in the future, and you're like, wow, I need
what a good reminder.
What a good I need that in my life again. I need this guidance once again. It wasn't be like me. Be like me.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is something that we have right now. It's like these writers get handed a checkbox from the studio, and they're told that we have to include these elements. Here is the point that we want to get across. This will get us the headlines that we need.
So do you think writers used to be better at speaking to things that were felt more universally as people?
I do. I do. You know, I think it's far more blatant now. It's far more catchy. That's also why you get the gimmicks now. The gimmicks are a huge thing in horror. You're going to throw the mask up in the trailers all over the place, even if it's only going to get 3 minutes of screen time in the final product. You're going to have an artificial intelligent robot doing a dance number all over the trailers, even though it has 20 seconds of screen time in the finished product.
Stephen, whatever do you mean?
Right? It's all become about the gimmick and hitting that checkbox. You can see it with the casting too, which I think really does a disservice to not only the audience, but the filmmakers as well as the actors, because now your movie takes place in a freaking cornfield in Idaho. I'm sorry, but the people living in a cornfield in Idaho do not look like the freaking rainbow here, okay?
Yeah.
You're not going to have an Asian. You're not going to have a Latino. You're not going to have the gay white best friend. You're not going to have the black guy who's dating the white girl all in one friend group. That is not going to happen. And a lot of these movies,
not yet, anyways.
Well, you know, but I live in West Virginia. Right. I know this better than anyone. Looks like.
No, and I'm here with you. I feel it.
And I'm not talking smack. I'm not saying that they, you know, that these people don't deserve to be represented, but what they do is they make it a point that these people are represented in a way that they become caricatures.
Yeah.
Kincaid from A Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Was just another member of the group.
He was just another member of the group who went on to face Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
Today, if you throw Kincaid into a horror film, well, everybody else gets to face Freddy Krueger, but he not only has to face Freddy Krueger, but also some jerk from high school who's a racist.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They don't get to just face the monster like everyone else because the monster is racism.
Yeah.
Or if it's the gay character just can't, well, they just happen to be gay. It's no, they have to be a caricature, and they have to face not only the monster but homophobia on a daily basis.
Right.
You know, they
Right.
just can't be themselves.
Right.
And with some of this casting we have seen, and we know diversity has always been in the horror genre. We've seen it with Kincaid. We've seen it with Roger from Night of the Demons. There's so many examples of this.
But there's like a lack of authenticity to the characters now, right? Instead of being fully fleshed out human beings with all kinds of interests and things that make up their personality trait, right? Their entire personality is that singular thing.
Yes.
Right? That they've been cast for so that they can check a box for some producers somewhere.
Exactly.
Right? And it does, yeah, you're exactly right. It does a major disservice to the actors themselves. I think I've come away from some films really feeling bad for an actor, you know, thinking like, they're going to watch this so excited, so happy to have a role. They're going to watch it with their families and then see like how it actually played out. Yeah. And oh my gosh, they were made to look like a caricature of, you know, because they're real people who have real lives and have a whole personality. And now they're playing a role that is, they've been now like tokenized. And it's like, that's horrible.
Yeah. And some of these actors, like you said, like we watched The Nun too. And it's clear.
That was the one that's the zinger for me.
And it's clear that they included a certain character just because of the color of their skin. Like this was the most non-character character I have ever. They may as well have CGI'd this person into the scenes.
Yeah, and it was so sad for me as a viewer because I really liked the actress. I was like really, you know, and I was like, give me something, give me more. And they gave her nothing. Like they literally, I was just like, oh, they're, you know what I mean? They're checking a box and now she's going to sit there and watch this and be so excited and just be like, well, I'm in a movie. I'm there. My face is there and that's exciting. But like they gave the poor thing like nothing to work with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, and that's too bad. And I think if the whole point of diversity in film is representation, then you need to be representing these people like they're real people because that's what they are.
Right? They have reduced them. That's what they are. They have reduced them to a checkbox. Yeah. Just like we know Hallmark films has a certain checkbox associated with their Christmas. There has to be a Christmas tree decorating scene. Cookie baking scene. Check. They have to go to an ice skating rink. Check. So it's not just that. It's not just in the diversity arena.
No, it happens a lot in film.
It's all over the place.
The check boxes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's something else that makes maybe newer movies a little more difficult for you to watch?
You know, there's this new trend going on, and I actually think it started with Kristen Stewart in that godforsaken Twilight series with the sparkly vampires. I've only seen one of them. That was enough for me. But she would whisper her dialogue in that with a little bit of mumbling as well.
She adds the mumbling to it. It's not just whispering, it's a little bit of mumbling.
Right. And I've noticed that some other young actresses have really latched onto that and ran with it, and they've almost made it their whole shtick. Micah Monroe in It Follows and Longlegs particularly has really just stuck with that style of acting.
I've actually read that a lot of sound engineers, the guys actually on set recording the sound on movies, are having a lot of trouble with young actors, male and female, whispering their lines. And they speak about the fact that that never used to be the thing, that actors were trained to project, to enunciate, and now it's like all of that training is out the window. The gentleman whose interview I was reading was saying that like that they think that that's almost part of their acting, like that's part of what they're like on purpose. Like it makes it more gravitas. So it brings gravitas to what they're saying, God. And it's destroying like their ability to mix the sound properly.
Yeah, I've worked in the audio department on film before, and I can tell you that those guys are some of the least respected members of the filmmaking community.
Oh no.
They come in absolutely last. And they are very much kept out of the loop of the filmmaking process. I guarantee you there are films that have been shot, they have started filming, and then remembered afterwards, like, oh shit, we forgot sound.
No way.
I guarantee it.
Wow. And you know what's interesting is that brings us like right to a major problem I have. And it's probably at least 10, 15 years old as well. So don't feel bad about that. Like and I'm sure everyone has noticed suddenly, if you're watching a movie at home, you've got to sit there with the volume remote so you can turn it up, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down, because the special effects are so much louder than the dialogue. And it's so funny because I love action films and I have my whole life.
Yeah.
And that was not a problem in Terminator. That was not a problem in Aliens. That's, some of the big action films, Predator, all that, Die Hard, like that was not happening, right? In the big action films of like the 80s and 90s. But suddenly, sometime in the 2000s, something has gone wrong with sound mixing.
Yeah.
And you get just blasted with stuff that you can't, like, I mean, we've done it a million times. We're watching a movie with especially a lot of like gunfire or whatever. And I'm like, oh God, turn it down. Because it's so loud.
Yeah.
And then characters start speaking again. I'm like, oh God, turn it up.
Yeah. And there's so many technical reasons why that could be happening. It could be the streaming service you're watching it on. It could be your speaker setup. It could be the particular movie. It could be a number of things, but it can't all just be boiled down to one either, because we've had this problem in theaters before as well with the audio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, it's happening in the movie theaters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that sound is coming out.
Yeah.
With the film.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's because, speaking as an editor myself, it is really, really, really difficult to balance audio when you have somebody who is as loud spoken as I am versus somebody who's going to come in and whisper like that. Yeah. And there's also so many other things that go into it. Where are they filming? Is there going to be echo? Is there going to be a lot of background noise? So then they might have to mix a shotgun mic's audio with a lav mic's audio. And, particularly for these whispering actresses, they're probably going to have to mix both.
Well, that's what's interesting is, so the interview I read went on to talk about the fact that the sound engineer used to be a part of the editing.
Yes.
And that's not true anymore.
They're barely a part of the filmmaking process now.
Yeah. So that's a big part of the problem, I would imagine, is that the experts are no longer a part of the finished product.
Oh, in so many ways. Yeah. In so many ways.
Yeah. It's just interesting. I'd love to know the science, right? Like who decided that at some point that like, those sound guys, we don't need them around anymore. We can do this.
Well, that's part of that. That's all over the board, really. Your directors used to sit in the editing room as well. Now, less and less directors are doing that. Cinematographers used to work with the editors to accomplish the shots that they had intended to be in the film or the look that they were going for. That's happening less and less because they are giving the film to these editors with the guidelines of get this done as quick as you possibly can. And then we're going to throw it out there on a streaming service.
Yeah.
Or sometimes into the theater.
As quickly as possible.
Because if you've noticed, movies do not look the same as they used to look at all. And it's not just because of digital filmmaking. Now, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, early to mid, they did begin to introduce digital filmmaking, and it did have some limitations. Specifically, you can see that the lights would be absolutely blown out. And the darks would just be like this dark, gross mass of digital noise.
Okay.
Now, digital filmmaking has come a very long way, and the high dynamic range and all that. So now it can almost emulate the film look that film gave us.
Mm-hmm.
But movies are looking worse because they're not taking them as seriously as they used to in editing. Those cinematographers aren't going in there. The directors aren't going in there. They're barely doing any color grading. And one major reason for that are the superhero movies. Yes, I know. You're a big fan, but hear me out. Okay. So the superhero movies specifically are very CGI heavy.
Right.
So while they're on set, they don't want to cast shadows or do this. So it's very flat lighting, and it's shot in this very flat cinema sort of picture profile, because they don't know exactly what the finished product they're going for yet,
where
because they're shot
to be, or
because they're going to implement a lot of computer generated imagery into the film.
Yeah.
So everything needs to be as flat as possible, as evenly lit as possible, and then they can throw them into a spaceship, or they can put an explosion over there, or they can CGI another character into the shot with them. And then sometimes digitally
saying to themselves, we'll fix that in post.
We'll fix it in post.
And it doesn't happen.
And it doesn't typically happen. And all the filming has already been completed.
It's interesting because I feel like in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of really, like, I don't know if you want to call it playful or interesting, like, color grading happening in film. Yeah. And it's something that I feel like got made fun of a lot, especially by, like, cinema snobs. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, there's that blue color.
There's that,
But it's funny because I feel like now I'd almost like, how about some blue color grading?
Right.
Just to see somebody playing with it, that somebody took the time to, like, tweak the tones and tweak the, you know what I mean?
It's just
they did something. They did it. They did some color grading.
Yeah, remember in the mid to late aughts, they latched onto this style of color grading where everything was hyper saturated.
Oh, the hyper saturation. Thank you, Supernatural.
Right. Yeah. So they would oversaturate it so much that it would introduce film grain. And now it's like, can we please get back to that? Because at least it was colorful. At least they were boosting colors. But if you see new superhero movies in particular, and it has bled over into other movies, because like I said, you have no clue what they're going to do in post with the CGI and stuff like that. But like, go watch something like Deadpool versus Wolverine. Everything is so flat.
Yeah.
None of the colors pop.
Yeah.
And nobody's trying anything new artistically on set. Yeah. It's all being done in post through a computer, and with the advent of AI, things are only going to get worse in that realm.
Yeah. Thank God for indie horror filmmakers, right?
Well, and
see, I think you get a little bit more of that in kind of the because
they don't have the supercomputers and the.
I mean, because to circle back, I think about something that maybe Longlegs did well is there was some of that like interesting, almost.
It had
artsy.
Some very interesting cinematography. A24 accomplishes the same thing, but Longlegs did have a very flat picture. They did have a very flat picture, but at times they would allow themselves some colors that did look pretty. It kind of went with what they were going for.
Yeah.
And you may think to yourself, well, Steve, I'm a cinema snob. I love my old films. You can just go back and watch your old stuff. Well, as new technology,
we love new movies.
We love new movies. We do. And we love our old movies.
And I
think
love
our classics.
Key is like all of this is coming from the fact that like we love going to the theater. We love seeing new movies, and so it's so disappointing to get so excited to see something and have these same issues coming up again and again.
Yeah. And it is now permeating our catalog of classic films as well. The films that we grew up with. You mentioned Terminator earlier, and you mentioned. Well, now that those films are getting transferred to new technologies like the 4K, Ultra HD, they are going back and sometimes with the help of AI, they are remastering these so you get artifacts within the film like that horrendous Jaws 2 transfer. But
I know I have been warned to not watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy in 4K because they did that to it.
Oh.
And it's sad because if I watch it in just regular Blu-ray, high def, oh my God, it's so beautiful.
It's beautiful, right?
Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Well, and that's and that's a good, film to bring up because they utilized a ton of CGI, but Peter Jackson is such a great filmmaker that he still utilized on-set techniques to get the look that he was achieving. He didn't just light everything flat. He was like, no, we're not going to do some color. No, he did it all and then utilized CGI as well. And that's why those films are legendary. People love those.
Yeah.
But speaking of those older films, what was great was you couldn't see everything in them.
Oh, when the room was dark?
When the room was
or the
dark,
background was dark?
You had to look.
Yeah.
That was part of it. It was like a little Easter egg hunt. It's like, oh my God, look at those. Look at how much fun people have with films like The Shining, trying to figure out all the things Stanley Kubrick hid in the background, right?
In there.
Or films that are dark like Silence of the Lambs or Seven. Films like that really utilize cinematography and color grading to their advantage. Well, now on the new 4K transfers of some of these films, they're treating them like new films and they are boosting.
They're trying to fill in those blanks that were left there on purpose.
They are boosting the shadows to brighten those up to where those inky, beautiful blacks are just gray. They're like a dark gray now.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, so you're losing color.
Yeah.
Boosting these things, and I've said this for a while. I'm certainly not saying this was a superior technology, but I do enjoy the look of VHS. That is one thing, I think the 80s films had going for them. Not saying I don't love watching them on Blu-ray, God knows I do, or 4K or DVD. But the fun thing about going back and watching a VHS, the grain and just like the crappy quality of the video. You missed
some of that fuzz that would come up on the bottom of the screen.
It added to the experience. It wasn't, some of these movies, it's fun. And when you go and watch the newly remastered version and you're like, oh my God, it was raining in that scene? Or, oh my God, that woman has a second nipple. It's like a third nipple, right? But, everything wasn't just out there flat out in the open. It just added to the nostalgic feel of it. And I feel like we're erasing that in some of the new transfers. It's like, don't mess with what the greatest done on that film. Don't mess with the cinematographer, the work he's already put in.
Right.
Don't try to outthink him, 30 years later. Don't do that.
Right.
Don't do that. Just give us a more crisp version of that film. Don't brighten it. Don't try to color enhance it with your AI program.
Yeah.
Let that be. That is why it is a classic. It doesn't need your help, Todd, who went to Cambridge University. Come on, leave it alone. But I think that's part of the problem we have. I've heard people refer to it as fast food cinema. They want to get these movies out as quickly as possible. So you do have things like, well, the cinematography doesn't matter. It's just going to be very paint by numbers. The color grading, do we even need it? Let's just get a digital imaging technician on set who plays with the colors as we film.
So it's okay if this movie looks like that movie, that looks like this movie, that looks like, and they all look the same and they all feel the same. And
yeah, it's all factory made.
Oh God, it goes right back to our check boxing.
It goes back to the check boxing. There's not going to be any risks being taken.
Yeah. Is that why we get all the requels, prequels, sequels, reboots?
Absolutely, because we have heard this on videos that I've worked on. I do a lot of research for some of my 10 things you didn't know about insert movie title videos, right? Remember when I was researching the Halloween 2018 film done by Blumhouse Productions with Danny McBride, David Gordon Green? If you remember, there was an interview clip of Jason Blum smiling to his ears about how happy he was that Blumhouse has a specific formula and he wanted to apply that formula to an established intellectual property.
Yeah.
And see how well it paid off.
His words.
That was his words.
Yeah. He wanted to apply his formula
to an intellectual property like Halloween.
An established intellectual property.
And it paid off massively for him.
It did. People loved those movies a lot more than I thought they would.
Right. They just inserted a lot of fan service.
Yeah.
And it worked in their favor. And then once they used up the tank on the fan service and had to go off on their own, you saw where they took the franchise.
It went off the rails.
But it still had the title Halloween associated with the production. They made a ton of money off of that.
Yeah.
And now that property is already being shuffled by the A.K.A.s again. Yeah, it's back in the hands of Malik A.K.A., and he's already talking about what he's going to do next with the franchise. That is why you're not getting new original movies. It's really rare that you get anything that's not a sequel or a requel, like you said, a remake, a reimagining, any of that. I mean, for God's sakes, we're going to be at Scream 8 by the end of the year. Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready for some fresh horror. We both really enjoy Robert Eggers. And I was almost disappointed to see that he was doing a remake.
Right.
When he did Nosferatu.
Yeah. It's like, give this guy,
And this is coming from somebody who loves Dracula and loves vampires. And I was still like, oh, but I love all of your original films so much.
Right. He's one of our saviors. Don't use up his talent. Don't take up his time.
It's a waste his time on remakes.
Yeah, on stuff we have already seen. But that's how it is, man. These studios want to get it out and get it done ASAP. I mean, you saw when I was working on that Hallmark Christmas movie, we were shooting a Christmas movie in, I believe it was May and June. It was like a 25-day shoot, which is fine. Most movies are on a 30-day film schedule. They had that film released by Thanksgiving.
Yep. That's right. Thanksgiving weekend. Yeah.
I was on that film set in June.
Yeah.
By Thanksgiving, I was sitting on a couch watching it with millions of other people around the world on a streaming platform.
Yep.
They wanted it done and out there as soon as possible. Prime example of fast food cinema, and that's what all of these other production companies are doing because Netflix is just like Spotify. And how Spotify is moving away from the artist's music and making their own.
They make their own, yeah.
Under fake artist names. Netflix has now gone into, well, this is a Netflix original. We control
everything about the production.
Everything about the production. Yeah. We control all the licensing. We do not have to pay anyone for this. This is ours. It goes in our back catalog, never has to be removed from our service. We make all the profit from this.
Yeah.
And that's why they do it. And that is all they're doing, man. It's like a factory. Get it done. Get it out.
Which is heartbreaking because this is our art.
It is. So now the market is
not supposed to be made in a factory.
Right? But they have flooded the market.
Yeah.
With a landmass of cheaply made options that just overstimulates everybody. Well, this movie sucks. I'm going to flip one over to something else in 3 minutes.
Well, and it's interesting, like an odd, I think, side effect, right? Of everyone watching different things on different streaming services and there being so many choices and so many, I feel like it's really rare for there to be like a cultural phenomenon anymore.
Right.
Where everyone has seen this movie and you can all talk about it and you're all immersed in it and everybody loves this new movie that just came out. And I feel like even if it happens for a moment, the moment is gone so quickly. And as cheesy as this sounds, like the example that comes to mind for me is Titanic. Like, I know that's random, but I am a girl of a certain age. Yeah. And I remember when the movie came out, my girlfriends and I saw the movie in the theater.
Yeah.
Like a dozen times. Like, seriously, probably like 7 times, literally. And I mean, it was our whole summer that summer. You know what I mean? Like all that spring, summer, whatever. Like we watched it for months and it's all we talked about. And we got super in. We went to see the Queen Mary because it was a same era boat. And, you know, we did the tour and we ate at the restaurant. And so everything about it, it's like we got fully immersed into the whole. And it's funny because as much as, you know, we can make fun of something like Twilight. That was just, you know, just a few years after Titanic. And it had the same kind of impact, this like cultural impact where like all the young girls at the time were so into it. And they're in the t-shirts and the teams and it's like, man, you know, and it's like, yeah, I was too old that was not happening for me. Yeah. You know, but like I miss that for young people. Like I miss like, where's the like, wherever, and it's, for years, like where Harry Potter, like people got to be into that for years. Right. You know what I mean? As opposed to just, for a minute. Like you brought up Megan earlier and it's like, man, people were so into that for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. The people, so that's the new thing. Remember when you would go to the mall or go to a theater or you'd even get a phone call, somebody would be, dude, have you checked out Saw yet?
Yeah.
You haven't?
Yeah.
You need to watch that, man. I'm telling you now, that's one you do not want to miss.
Yeah.
Now it's like, hey, man, have you watched Yellow Jackets? And you're like, no. And they're like, oh, okay, well, you know, it's pretty good. Yeah. You know, it used to be that, but yeah, that was so amazing. The culture was incredible. That was part of the package, right? You would go, that's why I loved the Saw franchise. I would go on premiere night. There would be lines of people just like me wearing Saw shirts. I had my Saw beanie on. Yeah. We were all one, and we were ready to see the latest entry to our favorite franchise at that time. Yeah. You were part of a phenomenon. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And now it's like you don't get that experience. Maybe the closest.
Even when you try to make it happen. Because I remember like that's one of the things I love about The Substance. Is how many of our friends and the HorrorFam and we're like, have you seen The Substance yet? Have you seen The Substance yet? Will you please watch The Substance? Why haven't you seen The Substance yet? And that's something that it stuck. Like people were like begging, please watch. And then we saw it and then we did the same thing to everybody else. Have you watched that yet? You need to watch that. Why haven't you watched that yet? You haven't watched The Substance yet? And then, you know, award season came around and Demi got to take some home and the special effects got to take some home. And it was just like, so it had a moment and I love that. I love that.
She got to take some appreciation home, but
you know,
that just doesn't exist anymore though, really. I think, especially with streaming and what it's become, the closest thing I can think of is maybe Stranger Things.
That's true. Stranger Things gives us, and you know, the sad thing is I feel like we got some good seasons and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And then it became so disjointed and you're waiting 2 or 3 years for the next season and all. And so that the momentum that show had as a cultural phenomenon kind of fizzled.
Yeah, it's going to be like Stranger Things, the college years.
yeah.
But I get you. That was some of the stuff that made...
But yeah, the first like 2 or 3 years of Stranger Things was so fun and people were really into it for sure.
That's some of the things, though, that made movies so special was that zeitgeist and that marketing. You remember you could go to McDonald's and get a Demolition Man cup or a Judge Dredd cup or the Batman, those glass Batman mugs you see people talk about when they reminisce about the 90s. It's like you could get stuff. Everybody was into that at the same time. You felt like you were part of a family.
Yeah.
Now it's like, hey, have you seen the 3000th horror movie Netflix or God forbid Hulu has put out this
year?
Shudder
or whatever. Like there's so many streaming services putting out, you know, like cheap films of all genres. Like it's just worth, you know, specifically talking about horror, but it happens to everybody. But And it's all kind of watered down. You don't know what's good and what's not good, and you don't know which streaming service you should have and which one you shouldn't. And you don't. You know?
And even worse, typically when it comes from these, you know what they're doing that for. They are just doing it to hit a quota. They're doing it for mass profits on their company's behalf. You know, and it has also, as a result, killed off physical media to a degree. You can barely find 4K movies in person no matter where you go now. It's, you know, you almost have to like special order those things, which is a unique problem we've never really had before.
Yeah.
As far as film goes.
And it's interesting because I feel like I get why some people are like happy to not have the extra clutter. I get that. I don't think they're thinking about the actual like consequences of not having the physical media in their hands.
Absolutely.
Which is,
yes,
you don't own it.
Yeah.
You don't, if you are buying a movie for your own like Voodoo library, or was it Fandango at Home Now, or whatever it is, or if you're buying them on Amazon Prime, or you're buying them so you can own them and watch them whenever you want, you don't actually own. You don't own the film.
No.
You own a license agreement for the film, which they can revoke.
At any time.
At any time.
For any reason.
And what's even worse is they can edit at any time for any reason.
Yes.
And in this day and age where we're worried about censorship and we're worried about...
You do not want that.
Different media being banned by different groups or whatever, like, yeah. I want that book, that movie, that CD in my hot little hands. Like,
if it is something that you are passionate about, if it's a movie that you really enjoy, I highly suggest that you do own it. Now, I'm a big collector of physical media. I'm a big proponent for it. I love it. I've lost tons of video games because I lost my PlayStation library. And Sony literally told me, we are holding these ransom. You don't own them. Because I asked them to clarify it for me. That is how the licensing of digital media works. You do not own it at all. And yes, like you said, you know, on some of these streaming platforms as well, stuff that you don't own, but you just stream, they alter some of that stuff. Like me and you watched The Notebook on Netflix. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that.
Why?
But
we're a couple and we watched
right,
a romantic movie together.
That's true. But we get to the ending of it and they had chopped up the ending because it was too sad for certain audiences.
Yeah. So it was, apparently we didn't know it at the time. We were just like, did Netflix just do this themselves? And apparently it was the edit that was done for the UK market. So it was an existing edit, but it's just it's the edit Netflix chose. Yes. And it was to remove how sad now in their minds, how sad the ending was. Now I think it's even more beautiful that they die together.
It's a much more effective ending. It is a much more effective ending.
They removed it.
But there's a consequence to all of this that most people won't even think about with the disappearance, the getting rid of physical media. And that is the fact that a lot of films got a second wind from their home media release. See, there were two big releases when a film...
classics, right?
Well, they would get another push. There was like another big release party when something would hit video. I know that you've seen things in theaters and you're like, oh man, I can't wait until that gets on video. I gotta have that and watch it again. It
used to take a year, but anyways, go ahead.
It did. It would take a year. You would finally get your hands on it and you would be happier than ever.
Yeah.
So that film got second life breathed into it. It got to live again on home media.
Particularly important for films that flopped in the theater.
Because
some of them did really well on home video.
A great example is Hocus Pocus. That film absolutely flopped theatrically. John Carpenter's The Thing also was big flop, was not well received by critics, in theaters.
Yeah.
When those things hit home media, now look, can you picture walking into a Spirit Halloween and not seeing Hocus Pocus stuff all over the place?
Yeah.
Can you imagine not hearing the HorrorFam say The Thing is one of their favorite horror films of all time?
Right.
If you didn't have that physical media release, it would have just been lost.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is these films and those filmmakers got a second chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now a film has to make all of its money back theatrically. It does not get a second chance on home media now. So studios are far less likely to take risks on anything other than established IPs like Blumhouse.
Especially with how quick the turnover is, right? Because if you don't want to pay to see a movie in the theater, and then for like the 2 months that you have to pay to rent it on a streaming service, I mean, you're waiting 3 or 4 months to see a movie for free on a streaming service you're already paying for. You know what I mean? It's not like we were saying, like back in the day, like if you missed a movie in the theater, you were waiting an entire year for it to come out to rent or buy. An entire year. And that's not true anymore. Like people just have to have a little bit of patience and then they don't have to pay to see the movie.
And I think
so that it's not making its money back. Yeah.
And I think because of this flooding of the market, I think of this catering to the lower attention spans. One of the consequences you're getting of that is theater etiquette. People do not know how to
behave themselves.
That's a good word for it. They don't know how to function in a social environment.
Self-control, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. So when we go see these, how many movies have we seen in the past 2 years where people have been on their cell phones? People have audibly groaned.
Dude, you sat next to a young lady who took a selfie of herself with the flash on in the middle of a movie. So yeah, a lot.
Not just the middle of a movie.
I feel like every movie we've seen together in the theater, we've had some shit. Unless we were the only ones, which has happened a couple times.
It has.
We've had some shenanigans or another going on.
Not just the middle of a movie, though. It was in the middle of Saw X.
Yeah.
And those movies are known for their intensity.
Tension.
And I absolutely love the Saw franchise. I really wanted to sit back and enjoy that film. Had a gaggle of teenage girls beside of me, accompanied by an adult.
By an adult. There was an adult person.
Every single one of them were on their phones. They were texting. And I know this because I was elbow to elbow with this young girl. And she pulls out her phone and takes a selfie with the flash on in the middle of a movie.
Horror film.
In the middle of an intense horror film. And same thing when we went to see Longlegs. Someone directly in front of me was on their phone for the entirety of that film's previews.
Yeah.
And that's when you have hope that, okay, this won't continue once the feature begins. It lasted
the whole time.
The entirety of the film.
And don't think, guys, that we're part of the problem by not saying anything. We always do say something, and we are always the bad guys for saying something, which is weird because I feel like, I was not a perfect angel as a young person. And if I ever got corrected by an adult in public, I was embarrassed. Like, let alone how I behaved, right? I was always, I was a yes, sir, yes, ma'am kind of kid. But that aside, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed for being called out on my behavior. And that's not true anymore. They're like outraged that you would dare say anything.
Yeah.
And it's not just, I'm not picking on a particular generation because it's not, there are parents out there that are my age and they're not embarrassed. Either, right? They're outraged that you're saying anything.
The parents kowtow
to
that
it's
behavior.
Everybody, right?
The parents kowtow to that behavior.
Yeah, if they've created that behavior.
They have. So this all works back to the lower attention spans that we're getting. These people can't even go, and a theater trip is not inexpensive. It has gotten outrageous.
Yeah.
These people are paying to go see a movie.
Yeah.
That they sit on their phones.
Well,
through.
it's like a feedback loop, right? Because they feed into each other. I think like, or which came first, the chicken or the egg? That whole thing, like, poor attention spans, or really you don't have to pay attention to anything anymore.
Yeah.
All of which come together to make the brand new movie watching experience a little difficult for us, right?
It does. But it's not the death of film yet.
We demand better.
We do demand better. It is not the death of film yet. We just think that things are changing. They're not changing in a positive way yet.
Yeah.
Hopefully, there are some studios out there and there are some directors out there who are trying new things. Mm-hmm. They're willing to put their reputations on the line for it. They're willing to put up their money for it. Mm-hmm. I think A24, I'm not a fan of every film they've ever released, certainly. I think there's some things that are just too conceited for me.
But we're glad they're doing it.
But we're glad that they're doing it, and their home runs are home runs. They make movies that stick with you. I think Robert Eggers is an amazing director, and I think he has a lot left to give us.
Yeah, if you haven't seen The Northman yet, what are you doing?
The Northman, The Witch.
Yeah. Well, a lot of, it's interesting because you and I both love The Witch, and I think a lot of people think it's boring.
I know.
But is it the attention?
Oh, could be. But I'll tell you what, I'm not giving up on physical media, and I'm not giving up on film.
Keep buying movies.
I'm going to keep buying movies. I'm going to keep loving movies.
Yeah.
I just hope we get some stuff out there from people who actually try, who actually care, and they make it for an audience who wants to sit down and enjoy the film itself.
I'm here for it. I'm ready.
So that is why we think movies suck to an extent, HorrorFam.
But they don't have to.
Until next time, my friends, look horror.
Listen horror.
Talk horror.